Welcome to Decentralized News, your weekly brief of the biggest stories affecting the cryptoverse. I am your host, Piter, joined as always by Ozzy. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. How about you, my friend?
Awesome. Another beautiful day. It's always beautiful here
Yeah,
in
it's
my
starting to
background.
finally look like spring around here. So I'm jealous of all the greenery. Still not quite green here yet.
All right, well, it's Monday morning. We're after a rocky week, a couple of weeks now. Markets were down bad after Liberation Day, the tariffs. And then they bounced hard after a 90-day pause while they try and cut deals, which sounds like Trump's personal Candyland when he set up his own retirement like land. Just
Yeah, let's make a
sounds
deal.
horrible. Yeah, like it's just he's in his own world now. But for China, not for the pause wasn't for China. They escalated to 145. But then there was an update that a fourth or third of that is exempt from the tariffs. Smartphones, semiconductors, other electronic devices, components, they're all exempt. My personal opinion, markets have a lot to digest. Dust has not settled overnight on this issue. I mean, there was some talk, what, are we gonna pump? Are we finally breaking out? And markets today are just like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, it also got really messy because there's talk about these exemptions, but then there's also talk that there aren't exemptions. They're just being reshuffled based on like maybe so lower tariff rates were not really clear. So everyone feels very unsure. And these exemptions in this 90-day pause doesn't apply to Mexico or Canada either. And so there's still talk about what that means for automakers and things like that. So lots of uncertainty still. And
Yeah,
this
there's
Monday,
headlines every day like EU wants to make a deal, Canada wants to make a deal. Like, is it true? There's reports all over the place.
yeah, there's reports all over the place. We did not record last week because the news was moving so fast and the reports kept changing based on who you were listening to that we figured it would make no sense to make a video and then go have that video be out of date by the time we were finished the ending the recording. So
And these deals, these trade deals, they're not like quick half-hour conversation. Let's do this. Okay, no tariffs. Yeah, no tariffs. All right, cool. Let's go. I mean, it's going to take a while for all this to work itself out, and whether it's a positive or negative, it just remains to be seen. Will it affect inflation? Remains to be seen. How much? All that just has not been digested yet.
not whatsoever. And right now, Bitcoin at the time of recording sitting at 84,729. That's kind of middle of the range for today. It's gone as low as about 83,500, 83,600, depending on where you're looking. And it's gone as high as 85,700, 85,900, depending on where you look. So that's pretty interesting. Really kind of rebounding from the lows last week of hitting 74.6 on several exchanges, some dipping a bit lower than that. So it's been pretty interesting. Coin's up
Yeah.
about 1.25% today, and alts are kind of sitting at a steady 2% up, more or less, across the board. Not too many straying from that pattern, except for
Yeah, well, it's kind of low volatility Monday. Surprising. Always expect fireworks possible on the Monday, but we'll be watching and reporting on the news. I did forget to mention we are not financial advisors. We do occasionally give our opinion. This is for education and entertaining purposes only. Please do your own research before investing. And let's jump right into an example. Did you see about this ohm crash over the weekend?
yeah, I did. It was definitely quite the talk of the town when this happened. Ohm over the weekend experienced a 90% crash in a single day, going from approximately 6 billion in market cap all the way down to about 500 million in market cap. It's sitting right around that level now, about 494 million. But it's pretty wild looking at it. Do you want to share some more details about it?
Well, I just, tried to get a quick update, find a couple of articles about it. But on April 13th, the mantra chain and the Ohm token tanked 90%. It's a new blockchain positioning itself in the real world asset space. After the crash, on-chain analytics platform Look On Chain, using Arcane intelligence data, claimed that 17 wallets deposited 43 million ohm into exchanges. These tokens constituted 4.5% of the supply. Two of these addresses were linked to Laser Digital, a strategic investor in Mantra. So claiming basically insider trading. Laser Digital denied it, and Mantra co-founder came out with his initial response saying reckless forced closures by centralized exchanges initiated the crash. I'm not even sure what that means. He further claimed that it was one particular exchange responsible, but it wasn't Binance. So just a lot of he said, she said. He also came out in AMA today denying the reports, that there's any insider trading going on. So we'll see what happens. Definitely a black eye. A reminder that these shiny new tokens are just little itty bitty babies, and we just don't know what's going to happen with them. And it's risky. They're risky investments.
Oh yeah, they're definitely risky. I mean, a lot of alts over like the last 3 to 6 months have experienced, 60, 70, 80% downturns in price, kind of coming from looking at their hype and then to to this current situation that we're in right now with some of these alts. But to have something like that happen in a day is quite noticeable, but it's
We're talking about billions and billions of dollars. So it seems to disappear. It's too bad. I mean, I looked on chain, there's about, what I saw was 40,000 holders. I'm not sure if I was looking at exactly the right thing. It was Etherscan of the token, but it showed about 40,000 holders. So, God bless them. That's for sure.
yeah, it always hurts to see people like in that kind of situation, but it shows. I mean, the value of the tokens that were moved onto exchange was about 227 million, and to for that 227 million to then cause that 90% cascade
Damage.
is
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah. It's hard. Be hard to recover, but I hope, wish him the best. Some other exciting news today. President Trump met with El Salvador's president Nayib Bukele at the White House. So that was pretty cool. What might they talk about? Probably immigration issues, and that's like all the headlines coming out around that. And I believe they had their press conference. No, like, talk particularly of Bitcoin or anything, but the cryptoverse is excited. It may bring development in the case for a U.S. strategic Bitcoin reserve, as they have been a forerunner that could have important lessons to share. So hopefully there'll be some headlines. Stay tuned.
Yeah, and then there's been some excitement as well about on X about the first kind of Bitcoin crypto bill being signed into law. It's kind of interesting. It is a crypto bill, but not the one that you would expect. On April 10th,
Yeah,
Donald Trump.
the headline is right on a technicality, maybe not in the overall hype.
Yeah, exactly. On April 10th, Donald Trump kind of signed a bill to overturn a revised rule from the IRS, which expanded the definition of a broker to include decentralized cryptocurrency exchanges, so DEXs. This required DEXs to kind of report information regarding their users and their customers, information about them based on the fact that they are quote unquote a broker. And at the time when it was signed by President Biden, or former President Biden, it was seen as being kind of impossible for DEXs to comply and a really kind of killing DeFi DEXs as a whole. And so this has now kind of killed that potential negative externality and allow DEXs to continue operating, because otherwise they would have technically been all illegal within the US.
Yeah, I mean, on the surface, this looks like a nice win for decentralized exchange, for DeFi in general. It doesn't seem to have affected the market too much, so maybe in the long term it'll have more of an effect, but it looks like very positive news. Another positive story, in my humble opinion, Paul Atkins has been confirmed as the new SEC chair, set to replace Gary Gensler. Not sure if it's quite official yet. It's been sworn in or whatever. He was an SEC commissioner. I looked into him just a little bit. He was an SEC commissioner from 2002 to 2008, so has some experience there. He is known for advocating market-friendly policies that reduce regulatory burdens, particularly for small businesses and emerging industries like cryptocurrency. So, and then also on his wiki page says he was co-chair of the Token Alliance, a cryptocurrency advocacy group for the Chamber of Digital Commerce. There was a press release from 2020 where he was given a role in the board of advisors. So maybe that's what it was. But involved since at least 2020. I'm not sure what his holdings are or anything like that, but looking good over at the SEC.
Yeah, definitely much kind of better and more, hopefully more friendly attitude than Gary Gensler. He definitely seems to have experience, and having been involved in the SEC before, he does know the space a little bit. So this is hopefully good news for crypto moving forward. Talking about crypto moving forward, let's talk about a little bit of adoption stories that have happened over the last couple of weeks. The most interesting for me, without looking too deeply, is MasterCard's partnered with Kraken to allow European users to spend Bitcoin at over 150 million merchants worldwide. So this is kind of a powerful partnership for both MasterCard and for Kraken. Users now to spend Bitcoin. This is starting to see Bitcoin as currency as well as a strategic holding. It's limited to Europe right now, but still starting somewhere.
This is the kind of adoption that is even maxis are like, I don't know if they could ever get there. Like final form of Bitcoin is being used for everyday transactions as a currency, as a store of value. So we'll see how that plays out. I feel like we've seen headlines like this before. Does it actually get usage? Are people going to use Bitcoin instead of fiat? Well, we'll see. And there's also some hype around GameStop. So are they gonna buy Bitcoin? There is some hype on X, like it's happening. We'll see. It's around this 1.3 billion they're sitting on from a stock sale. So they said they're gonna hold Bitcoin. They had some kind of quorum or something with their shareholders, I think, a vote, I believe is how it went down. And they were sitting on a bunch of cash, but they ended up selling stock. But they had a pretty successful sale and they've got some money. It's supposed to be for buying Bitcoin. So some hype around, all right. So win Bitcoin.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. The sale was specifically to purchase Bitcoin, so just exactly
And
when that
will
all
it pump
gets
the markets?
deploys.
Does it pump the markets?
Yeah, when does it pump the market?
With pump.
It definitely looks good. Makes it helps the whole market feel a little bit better, and that comes as MicroStrategy and MetaPlanet also initiate some more buys on Bitcoin, adding to their both their personal stockpiles. This is a bit par for the course, but always worth.
Last week they didn't, so they Bitcoin was dipping and they weren't buying. It was like, oh, what's going on? But there was some like little bit of strangeness around MicroStrategy. There was a story that one of their three custodians was now under investigation for from Homeland Security for like money laundering or some squirrely stuff. And then they also updated some of their fine print that clearly stating that if you own MicroStrategy, you don't own Bitcoin. I don't know that it's that much of a shock to some people, but at the same time, the fact that they did it and a little bit of FUD surrounding MicroStrategy at the
Oh,
moment.
Twitter will find any reason to be upset about something. Updating their fine print probably just has to do with a legal review that they do every once in a while.
Disclaimers. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like, oh, surprise, you own MicroStrategy stock, no, not Bitcoin. Yeah, like what's the big
yeah,
deal? Well,
and
there's
then
no go for it.
I was just gonna end my Mastercard's not the only one allowing people to spend Bitcoin. Do you want to? Who else is? Who else is letting people spend their Bitcoin?
We found this headline: Le Mans School. Maybe you haven't heard of it. I never have. But anyway, the first school in the UK to accept Bitcoin for tuition. So adoption continues, but macro seems to be in the driver's seat. So let's do a macro update. Certainly, always interesting, especially with the markets doing what it's doing. A lot of questions about what's the Fed going to do. A lot of hype. Emergency meeting. They're going to, before the next meeting, they're going to cut. But that's not how it's playing out. But anyway, Financial Times reported on April 11th that the Federal Reserve would absolutely be prepared to deploy its firepower to stabilize in chaotic markets. Susan Collins, head of the Boston Fed, is where this quote seems to come from. Markets are continuing to function well. We're not seeing liquidity concerns overall, but does have the tools to address concerns about market functioning or liquidity should they arise. We have had to deploy quickly, various tools in the past. We would absolutely be prepared to do so as needed. So, maybe this was a little overhyped too, the statements, but
Yeah,
still reassuring to the markets. The headline was nice when it was going on.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. The headlines always seem to be blown up a little bit, but it definitely does show like the Fed's aware. They're keeping an eye on it. This was especially happening as there was a bit of a crisis on bonds. The U.S. Treasury bonds of various sorts were kind of having their yields skyrocket because of lack of demand. A lot of hedge funds selling their bonds and moving
That's even
towards
more.
cash position.
That's even more dust to this whole tariff story because what is it? Is it Scott Bessent? Like what he
Yeah.
wants is low treasury or something. And then like when this first started, that was shooting down, and then it shot back up. So what's gonna happen with that? But yeah, I mean it was going up. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's where a lot of this story comes from, was especially around bonds, but at the same time the market was had just been, tanking the entire week due to this kind of instability and concern around what was occurring with bonds. It ran a couple of days before those comments in that articles when Bitcoin kind of double bottomed on that 74.5K kind of number. So definitely worth watching. And it's not the only thing that's been kind of catching people's eye about the Fed. On last week, CPI for March came out, and it came in really cool. Year over year, we were looking at going from 2.8 to 2.4%, which was 0.2% below the expectation of 2.6, which was pretty massive. And the month over month number for CPI actually went negative for the first time in quite some time. And so, really, kind of we're seeing across the board decreases and decreases below expectations or more than expectations for CPI and inflation as a whole. And then PPI kind of followed the same pattern a few days later, going cool and beating expectations in terms of that decrease. So that was really interesting, but that news kind of got buried in the whole what's going on with bonds story, and Bitcoin and the entire market did not respond favorably to this news. So it was actually kind of the morning started off green, and then this news came out and everything turned red. So a little bit of a weird combination there, but might have to do
It
with the
wouldn't
fact.
be if the market pumped like crazy after that. Would not be like a shocking headline. Yeah.
No,
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
you
this
would
whole thing has been
expect.
surprising. With this talk of emergency meetings and all that, it was like, okay, so let's look at what is the chances of a rate cut at this next meeting on May 7th, 22 days. And I was pretty shocked to see it's 85% chance, no cut, as we stand today.
Yeah, that's absolutely nuts. I mean, in some ways it follows what the current line from the Fed has been, is that, looking at June, July to really start seeing that transition, but to see the market despite all of this like downside volatility not expecting a cut is interesting. And we're still 22 days away, so this could still change, but they've been holding pretty steady at around this 85% no cut for quite some time. So this
Higher
is,
for longer.
yeah, this is definitely interesting, but
They're
what's
still not
very,
technically, they're not the 2% inflation. They're getting there. 2.4, it's getting there. And they're slowing down quantitative tightening, but they're not ending it. So, and they haven't announced exactly when, but there's some expectations we're a few months away, and it should at least maybe we won't go into a quantitative easing, but at least an end to quantitative tightening.
yeah. And looking at the meeting after this May meeting, it's at a 70% chance of a cut in that June 18th meeting. With 6 meetings left in the year, the market's slowly starting to favor 4 cuts over 3 cuts at about 45% right now. So that's something to watch, as well as how many cuts do we actually get gets a little bit closer and a little bit clearer with everything going on with tariffs, inflation, and quantitative policy, whether easing or tightening. So that was very interesting. But do we want to dive into that speed run?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's dive into the speed run. So today is what, April 14th. So April 7th was the deadline for the U.S. federal agencies to report their Bitcoin and crypto holdings to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. That was off the executive order. So we'll see if we ever get any updates on that. Where did it go? Does it still exist? Speaking of, where did they go? Crypto lawyer James Murphy sues the U.S. Department of Homeland Security to force the agency into revealing whom it believes to be Bitcoin's creator, Satoshi Nakamoto. I thought this story was so cool. Basically, he's suing, like, they may have, the argument is they may have some information and might know who it is, right? I forget the details of the exact investigation or whatever. But some people say, like, okay, so why even ask? Don't you want to keep it a secret? And his point is, like, look, if somebody knows, everybody should know. If there's like 13 bureaucrats that know who he is, why do they get to know? You know, and the rest of the world doesn't get to know. So no, we're suing them. So he's not saying it's there. He's just saying if they know, they need to tell us. That's what the
Yeah,
I
that's
thought. I
that's
thought it
a
was a fun story.
it's very fun. It's kind of it's interesting the fact that he's going after Homeland Security about it. He's not going
Like
after
freedom of information type of thing, you know.
yeah, he's not going after the NSA. He's not going after the FBI or anything like that.
It's
So
particular. It's like a certain investigation. They're like, all right, well, if you know, you have to share, you know, something
yeah,
like that.
yeah, and it's kind of interesting because this story, although not directly ties into this next one, there are some correlations. The Justice Department is dismantling their crypto unit and stating because of Trump's like action of regulation around digital assets that there isn't necessarily as strong a need for it as there previously had been under the kind of pretty strong position of the previous government and of the previous president. So pretty interesting to see the Justice Department pulling their crypto unit at this point in time.
Yeah, it's like further recognition that choke point 2.0 is over. But on the other side, there's that crypto bank that's getting investigated by Homeland Security. So I don't know, maybe some level of regulation, especially on banks, maybe is necessary. But anyway, Ripple agrees to acquire prime broker Hidden Road for 1.25 billion. So Ripple expanding. I don't know too much about this deal. Never heard of Hidden Road.
No, but brokers play a part in so, like having a broker's license is very handy and can sometimes be difficult to obtain depending on who you are or can be lengthy to obtain. So acquiring a prime broker may facilitate some of their activities that they're attempting to implement around stable coins or fiat transfers, that type of thing. So interesting to see. I don't know much about Hidden Road, but
1.25
the
billion is a big number.
yeah the but that's the TDLR on brokers, and to kind of add to Mantra's story, another token you should keep your eye on is the Trump meme coin, because 5 days from now on April 19th, 20% of the circulating supply will be unlocked, which is a significant amount of supply, especially considering the fact that only took 4.5% of Mantra's supply to tank the price 90%. So keep your eye on this, and if you do hold the Trump meme coin, keep an eye on what that might happen on April 19th. That
Right
that
on.
covers our stories for this week.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. Like and sub if you're enjoying the content. We do appreciate it. We are not financial advisors. Please do your own research.
Yeah, do your own research, and we'll see you all next week. Thanks for watching.